The story begins with a dangerous criminal named Frank Morris, who was being transferred to a high-security prison called Alcatraz. The prison sits on an island in the middle of the ocean, and no inmate had ever escaped from there. But Frank was known for breaking out of prisons. He had already escaped from several before this. Still, escaping from Alcatraz wasn't something anyone had seriously considered, let alone attempted. As soon as he arrived, Frank was thoroughly searched and then taken to his cell, the place where he was expected to spend the rest of his life. The next morning at breakfast, he met an older inmate named Litmus, who had a pet mouse he secretly cared for. While talking with Litmus, Frank noticed another prisoner named Wolf openly trying to provoke him. Frank ignored Wolf and continued his conversation, but soon after he was called to the warden's office for an orientation. The warden warned him not to even think about escaping. He said many inmates like Frank had come and gone, but none had ever made it out. During that speech, however, Frank quietly took a small nail clipper from the warden's desk. It seemed minor, but he understood that in a place like Alcatraz, even the smallest tool could be useful. Once back in his cell, he hid the clipper inside his Bible. Later, during a group shower, Wolf approached Frank again and started bothering him. This time, Frank didn't ignore it. He grabbed Wolf and beat him up. That fight earned Frank a certain respect inside the prison, and after that, no one bothered him without a reason. Over time, the prison library became Frank's second home. There, he met the librarian, a man known as English, who was also serving a life sentence at Alcatraz. English had given up hope of ever leaving and had poured all his focus into books. He and Frank both enjoyed reading history, and that shared interest slowly built a strong friendship between them. Around the same time, Frank met another inmate named Doc, a talented artist who spent most of his time painting. Doc believed that a place like Alcatraz could drive anyone insane, but painting helped him stay mentally steady. That evening, a guard told Frank about a carpenter job that paid 15 cents an hour. It sounded simple, but trouble was already building. One day, while the inmates were out of their cells, Wolf returned again. This time, he had a weapon and planned to attack Frank. At the last moment, Doc warned him. Frank managed to block the attack using his jacket. A fight broke out between Wolf and Frank. When the guards stepped in to stop them, Wolf even attacked one of the guards. As a result, both men were sent to D-block, solitary confinement. Solitary meant being locked up alone. It was like a cage no inmate wanted to enter. And Frank was sent there simply for defending himself. That made him furious. After spending 2 weeks in isolation, Frank was finally released. To cheer him up, Litmus sent him a small welcome note through his mouse. Once back, Frank also became friends with his neighbor, Charlie, who was serving time for a major robbery. Charlie admitted he deeply regretted trying to cross the border to escape, because that mistake had only made his crime worse. The next day, without telling anyone, the warden decided to inspect the prison. During his walkthrough, he noticed his own portrait hanging inside a prisoner's cell. At first, he seemed pleased, but within seconds, his mood changed, and he ordered that all of Doc's paintings be removed from the prison. That decision crushed Doc. Painting was the only thing keeping him going. He cared deeply about every piece he created.
Frank tried again and again to calm him down. He told him it was just artwork and that they still had to survive in there. But Doc couldn't shake the shock. Then, one day, during a work shift, Doc deliberately cut off 3 of his own fingers as an act of protest against the warden. Guards quickly called for medical help, while Frank stood nearby, silently watching everything unfold. That same night, while sitting in his cell, Frank noticed a cockroach crawling out from near his bed. Seeing that gave him an idea. He started thinking that maybe the vent covered with paint could actually lead to a way out. Around that time, someone told him the real reason the warden had removed Doc's paintings was because he didn't like how his portrait looked. At the next meal, Frank met 2 brothers, John and Clarence, who recognized him from a previous prison. As they talked, the conversation turned to Alcatraz. They said escaping was impossible since the prison was surrounded by water on all sides. In their view, they were going to spend the rest of their lives there. But hearing that sparked something in Frank's mind. A new idea began to form. He wanted to make history. He wanted to be the first man to escape from Alcatraz. That night, using the small nail clipper he had taken from the warden's office, Frank started scraping the cement around the vent in his cell. Whenever he heard a guard's footsteps, he quickly hid the clipper inside his Bible and pretended to read, making sure no one suspected him. Over time, his effort began to show results. Slowly, the cement around the vent started to weaken. Meanwhile, during visiting hours, English and Charlie met their families. English felt awkward talking to his daughter. She had grown up so much during his time inside, and he regretted missing her childhood. At the same time, Charlie learned from his wife that his elderly mother's health was failing. According to the doctor, she only had a few months left. That news planted a strong desire in Charlie to escape from Alcatraz. The next morning at breakfast, Frank shared his escape plan with John and Charlie. He explained that the salty air and ocean moisture had weakened the prison structure over time. Because of that, they could scrape away the cement around the ventilation grates and remove them. From there, they could crawl through the opening, reach the plumbing pipes, and use that path to get out. Still, one major problem remained. Even if they got off the island, how would they cross the ocean? Frank pointed out that Clarence worked in the prison clothing department. He could slowly steal raincoats and some rubber cement without raising suspicion. Using those materials, Frank said he knew how to build a raft and life jackets. "Trust me," he told them. The plan impressed everyone. Together, they agreed to move forward with it. That night, Frank went back to scraping the cement in his cell just like before. This time, Charlie kept watch from his own cell to make sure no guards caught on. Frank was making progress, but the nail clipper was small and dull. It took a lot of time and effort to chip away at the cement, and he had to use extra force with each move. Because of all that scraping, Frank's hands were badly cut up and the pain was starting to bother him. The next morning, he told the others about the problem. They agreed that if they wanted to keep going, they needed a bigger, stronger tool. Right then, Frank looked at his spoon and quickly rubbed it against his shoe to make it look dirty and worn out. After that, he called a guard over and complained that his spoon was no good. The others backed him up and also asked for replacements. The guard didn't see anything suspicious and agreed to switch them out.
When they walked up to the front desk to exchange the spoons, John distracted the guard with small talk. While the guard's attention was elsewhere, Frank slipped an extra spoon into his pocket. Still, that wasn't enough, so he made a deal with Litmus, trading 20 days' worth of his dessert in exchange for some extra items they needed. Later, Frank melted the spoon down and combined it with the nail clipper and a coin, shaping a new tool. It worked much better than the clipper alone. One night, as Frank was quickly chipping away at the cement, a guard suddenly walked by. Charlie didn't notice him in time. Luckily, English stepped in at the last second and distracted the guard. That gave Charlie a chance to slam his fist against the bars, warning Frank. As soon as he heard the signal, Frank hid everything. They got away with it that time, but Frank realized he couldn't completely rely on Charlie. Over the next few days, Frank discovered that the vent grates were also secured with screws. To remove them, they would need yet another tool. Whenever Frank had a chance to go outside, he quietly scattered the loose cement from the vent so no one would notice. While working in the carpenter shop, Frank secretly crafted a small device. Getting it past the metal detector was the real challenge. To pull it off, he held a rusty piece of metal in his hand. When the detector went off, he handed the scrap to the guard, pretending that was the cause. Meanwhile, the real tool was hidden inside his shoe. Back in his cell, he used the device to remove the vent cover. Behind it was a network of pipes, which might lead to their way out. Frank knew they needed to plan even more carefully now. That's when they decided to make fake heads to fool the guards during nightly checks. They quickly began gathering supplies. John collected hair from the barber shop. Charlie arranged to get paint. With English's help, Frank gathered stacks of old newspapers. Once everything was ready, Frank got to work. First, he mixed the damp cement from the wall with strips of newspaper to shape a human head. After it dried, they would paint it and attach real hair so it would look convincing enough in the dark. One evening, Frank decided to climb alone to test the route. He positioned the fake head in his bed and set the fake vent in place.
After crawling through the pipe opening, he reached the top and found a heavy iron door blocking the way forward. He couldn't move it by himself. At that same moment, a guard was making his nightly rounds. When he stopped near Frank's cell, he seemed suspicious. Even so, somehow, they managed to avoid getting caught. Now they understood that their escape plan needed a few changes. The next morning, Frank and Charlie talked about what had almost gone wrong the night before. By then, John and Clarence had also finished making their own fake heads. After that, they all agreed to move forward with the updated plan. That night, John and Charlie went back to the same iron door. Working together, they managed to reach it again. Once they grabbed hold of it, they realized the door could actually be cut through, but they would need better, more advanced tools to do it.
The following day during music class, Charlie noticed an old fan. As soon as he saw it, he thought they might be able to turn it into a cutting tool, so he traded all of his dessert portions to Litmus in exchange for help. Charlie placed the fan inside an instrument case and carried it out of class without raising suspicion. As soon as the fan reached Frank, he got to work, reshaping it into something useful. Later, they returned to the iron door. This time, using their new tool, they were able to cut through it. It made quite a bit of noise, and the sound even reached a guard, but the guard brushed it off and didn't investigate. Their path was finally open. They decided they would escape on Tuesday night from Alcatraz, known as one of the most secure prisons in the world. But on Tuesday morning at breakfast, Frank quietly placed a flower on the table in memory of Doc. The warden immediately noticed it. Reminding Frank of prison rules, he crushed the flower under his hand. Litmus became furious at the way the warden acted and stepped forward as if to attack him, but suddenly he suffered a heart attack and collapsed. Later that day, the warden unexpectedly searched Frank's cell. He found nothing, which only made him angrier. Out of frustration, he ordered that Frank and Charlie switch cells. Meanwhile, Wolf had been released from solitary confinement and was ready to go after Frank again. But just as he moved in to attack, English stepped in and stopped him. That night, Frank, John, Charlie, and Clarence planned to meet inside the pipe area. At the last moment, though, Charlie panicked and decided he couldn't go through with it. The other three stuck to the plan, while Charlie watched his chance at freedom slip away. After getting past the iron door, Frank and the others climbed up to the roof, where they had to avoid the searchlights. Meanwhile, Charlie changed his mind and decided to try escaping after all. He rushed through the pipe system and reached the iron door, but by then he couldn't get past it alone. His fear had cost him his opportunity. On the roof, carefully moving out of the searchlight's path, Frank, John, and Clarence made it to the prison wall. They checked to make sure no one was nearby, then quietly climbed over and made it outside. The three of them crossed a road and reached the shoreline. Each of them knew exactly what to do. Calm but quick, they started inflating their raft. Blowing it up by mouth was exhausting, but they pushed through it. Finally, they stepped into the water and began moving away from Alcatraz for good. The next morning, when the guards made their rounds, everything seemed normal at first. Then they noticed Frank was still in bed. When they pulled the blanket back from his face, they froze in shock. Something had happened that they never expected. News quickly spread through the prison that inmates had escaped. In Frank's bed lay a fake head in his place. The guards immediately sounded the alarm, and it was soon discovered that 2 more prisoners were missing. A massive search began. Boats and even helicopters were used to look for them. Still, there was no sign of Frank, John, or Clarence. Some officers believed they must have drowned in the ocean. Deep down, though, the warden knew they had made it out. Someone had successfully broken free from Alcatraz, a prison thought to be impossible to escape. But he also had the prison's reputation to protect, so he publicly declared the 3 men dead. The truth was, not many people believed that story. This is a true story. Afterward, Frank became known around the world as a mastermind who broke out of prison. A secret search continued for a year, but no bodies were ever found, which suggests they likely survived.
If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.